Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sisters of Wellness. I'm Pamela Marshall at the Wellness Radio TV and at the Wellness Radio TV podcast. Of course, everything that is being talked about in the news as it relates to women today has to do with what's happening with Roe v. Wade. Well, my guest tonight, Brittany Coleman, she is an activist in the Gainesville community. She has worked on social justice issue, truth and reconciliation. Tonight, we want to talk about Roe v. Wade, not from the sense of what side is right or wrong. But one of the things that I said to Brittany, I, quite frankly, am happy that we're talking about it now because it gives us an opportunity to talk about women and the role that women play in society and the injustices that women continue to face in the United States of America. That's our topic tonight. I hope you will join us on Sisters. You know, it's hard to find good health people. Push the button again. Brittany, thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm a little bit behind you, so if it takes me a second to answer, I'll catch up.
Oh, there's a little delay, you think?
I think so, but I'm doing good. I'm really happy to be here.
And whoever just joined us, stay with us because this is going to be a great show. So, Brittany, you have been working in the community. You're with the Alachua County Victim Services Rape Crisis Center here in Gainesville, and currently the chair of the Alachua County Domestic Violence Task Force and conducts community presentations on trauma and trauma informed practices. Most notably, Brittany is a member of the Gainesville Remembrance Project Steering Committee, which is participating with the Equal Justice Initiative to bring awareness through truth and reconciliation to issues of race, terror, and oppression here in Alachua County. Beautiful and much needed work that you're doing. Um, Thank you for taking a moment to join us on Sisters of Wellness tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate being invited. I think we've had a couple of conversations before this, and it's timely. I think having these conversations is needed.
So, Brittany, 2 weeks before the leak that Roe v. Wade could potentially be overturned, we had already been talking. So, when
hmm
you saw that they were looking at overturning Roe v. Wade, what were your thoughts? What were your thoughts? No, you can't hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, you froze.
Oh, I did? Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, what were your thoughts when you saw the overturning of Roe v. Wade or the potential overturning of Roe v. Wade?
yeah. The potential for it. I mean, I think my reaction was like a lot of people. I don't know that it was surprising. I think we've seen the writing on the wall for a while now with the different nominees that were on the Supreme Court for the last couple of years. I think we've seen this coming. So it wasn't completely out of left field, but I think the outrage that people are feeling is warranted because like you said, this isn't about who's right or who's wrong, but I think it boils down to who gets to decide what a person does with their body, what women do with their bodies, and I think that's the bigger conversation here. So I'm sad to say that I wasn't surprised, but I think now is when the work has to begin and continue.
Should we be talking about why we were not more proactive?
Mm,
Because in the role that women play in almost every aspect of her life, whether it's true or not, but the impression is that she is to be somebody else is supposed to tell her what to do.
hmm Yeah, I mean, I don't know. So there's a lot of people that are doing this work. even here locally. So I know that there have been activists that have been, trying to strengthen legislation around this issue for a while. And, locally there are clinics that are doing this work that deal every day with protests, with threats to the safety of the clinic, the safety of the people who use these clinics. So the work is being done.
Well, you
And
know
now
what,
I think
Brittany?
it's just on the
I
national stage.
Yeah, and I guess I'm talking about the overall work because,
Mm-hmm.
as I've said on other shows, abortion is not as much the issue.
Mm,
It's what's being held out front and center. But this, the code, we live under a code in this country, in the world
yeah.
for that matter, for women, that
Mm-hmm.
that we are to operate under this it's spoken sometimes, but this code. That's the work that I'm talking about, that I wish we had more. Sometimes it feels like in Harriet Tubman, she said, I could have freed more slaves if they had known they were slaves. As we are looking at this issue, do you think it's that women don't realize what has happened to them?
That's a good question. I wouldn't say that. I think sometimes we just trust that the people who are in power will do the right thing. And I think today, especially, I mean, people are just trying to survive. And so coming to a rally or, doing different things is sometimes out of the realm of possibility for a lot of people who are just trying to put food on the table. But I do hear what you're saying and definitely feel like, there is a need for us to be aware of what's going on, who's in local office, who's in our state office, who are we voting for on a national level. So there is some responsibility to know, what's going on around you. But I do think that just, even over the last couple of years, people are just really, they're just trying to do the day to day. And it gets tough. It gets really tough.
So if women are, see, that's very concerning
Mm-hmm.
because, as my mother would often say, when women were fighting for the rights to go to work, we really just increased our workload because everything that had to be done before we went to work, as they back in the day they would say, a public job. Everything that had to be done before you went to your public job still had to be done when you got home, whether it was the household chores, the children, the all of that, the husband, if there was one there. But all of that still was on your plate. So are we so busy that we can't see what's going on, or we're so busy, we become so bogged down that we don't have the wherewithal to see that we're in this spider web that
Mm,
looks like things are okay.
mm-hmm. I missed part of that. It froze a little bit, but I think in some ways that's the goal, right? There's so much stuff happening that keeps us distracted that we don't often see what's going on a legislative level or on a political level. Um, and I think sometimes that's the strategy, right? That people are so distracted by the day-to-day living, that people who are in power get to take advantage of that, um, and do things like we're seeing here in Florida, like we're seeing in Texas and some other states that are really just rolling back the rights of women.
Brittany Coleman is an activist in the community, working on a number of social justice issues, rape and domestic violence issues. Brittany, when you're in your 30s,
Yes.
what are you seeing with women in your generation? I mean, how is the distraction? Has it grown so much that it's more about whatever social media makes as the agenda? with your peers, are they getting it? Are they completely missing out? What's in store for us as women? Did I freeze again?
So I think, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, with people that are my age and even younger, I mean, the generation after me, I think that's where you're starting to see a lot of the young activists take shape. But I do see us getting involved. I do see us starting to realize that we can't, necessarily sit on the sidelines, that we do have to be a little bit more involved, a little bit more aware. And if it's not, us actually doing the work, it's finding that person that is doing the work and relying on the things that they're sharing with you, keeping you in the loop. I mean, with social media, the ability to find information is just, like it's never been before. So I do think that the folks, in my generation, um, and some of the folks in the younger generation are actually starting to, I think, see the importance of this and become activated because of that.
Bea Richards was an actress back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. If you saw the movie Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, Sidney Poitier, and that was the first biracial couple on television, and she played his mother. But something that's even more significant than that role, she did a speech called A Black Woman Speaks. And most people have not heard that speech. But what she's addressing is the challenges that Black women have, the challenge that white women have, and how they mirror each other in different ways. And so I want to talk about what needs to happen in order for women to see the issues as women issues, because we also know the stories of when white women got the right to vote and when there were um, marches and that they expected the black women to be at the back of the marches. And so I want to play a little of that, Brittany, and then I want to talk about what it would mean if black and white women came together. Let's see here.
That I, a woman black, should speak of white womanhood. My husbands, my fathers, my brothers, my sons die for it, because of it, and their blood, chilled in electric chairs, stopped by hangman's noose, cooked by lynch mob's fire, spilled by white supremacists' mad desire to kill for profit, gives me that right. I would that I could speak of white womanhood as it will and should be, when it stands tall in full equality.
I'm going to make a bold statement and say that doing a TEDx talk is going to be the most
Well,
transformative and
I guess I need to pay for YouTube without any commercials. But B Richards um, talks about white womanhood, black women and white women. How is that gap today?
Mm, yeah, and if for people who haven't seen that whole performance, I highly recommend going and watching it. And it's easily found on YouTube. It's really powerful, and I listened to it again today. And really, I think what I took away from it this time around, the powerful thing about that speech is you take something different away from it every time you listen. And one of the things that I heard today was really a call to action for white women, for Black women, to see each other as equals, to see each other in their humanity, and to use that humanity to fight white supremacy. And I think the beauty of that today is that that work can still be done, because there are struggles. When we think about political movements, I think about Tarana Burke and the Me Too movement and how she started that. Really a call to arms that wasn't taken seriously on a national platform until it was then tweeted by a famous white woman. And so these struggles, I should say, are still happening today. And I think one of the things that that B teaches us is that we are on the same side of these fights, of these issues surrounding women, surrounding our ability to choose the life we want for ourselves. And I think once we can let down our defensiveness towards each other, we can really start moving towards our common goal, which is what this really is. We're not each other's enemy, which is also said in the piece. And once we start to realize that, we can move forward, I think, in a way that is about support, that's about love for one another, and how powerful that can be, right, when we join forces for the good of each other rather than the detriment of each other.
So also, Brittany, speak to how Black women get along in an effort moving forward or not. How does that need to be strengthened? Am I frozen? Hello?
You said speak to how Black women can
Yeah.
get. Well, I
Because
think
because that divisiveness, it exists between Black and white women, and then it exists between Black women.
mhm,
And,
mhm.
because sometimes I feel like if you only embraced and understood what we all have gone through historically, every day and every time we see a sister, we should say, "So glad you made it." Be like on Color Purple, you know?
Yeah, I think defensiveness is rooted in fear, right? Of if you have something that takes away from what I could have, or what, my family or whatever gets to enjoy. And I think that's the fallacy behind it, right? That if we're coming from a place of fear, then, the work can't be done in a meaningful way. And so we have to start realizing that there's enough for everybody, sis. Like we are on the same team, and there's a really funny video that I think it's on TikTok about entrepreneurs, and they're like, I don't care if a million people have done this, or if the industry is oversaturated with this one thing. If that's what you're meant to do, then do that thing. Um, and so, again, I think we have to evaluate when we come from a place that's defensive, really looking at where is that coming from? What am I afraid of? And is my sister the enemy here? Um, and really kind of doing that deep dive within ourselves, so that, again, we can come from a place of just shared understanding, right, and love, so that we can achieve together, right? Everybody's goals are going to look different. We all want different things, but I think that's the individual part of it. On a community level, we all want the same things, right? We want security, we want love, we want belonging, we want safety, and we can all have those things. There's enough of those things to go around, and I think that's the bigger conversation.
Brittany Coleman, who is an activist, and we are talking about women. And the overarching theme of this code that women live under in this country and around the globe, and how powerful it would be if women came together and recognized um, what has been done, an acceptable code that we live under, and it's not in keeping with nature. When you think about and you talk about working together, Brittany, have you seen ants working together? You know,
Yeah.
one ant may not be able to get this little piece of food, but 5 or 6 or 10 ants will gather around, and they will all take that piece of food, that crumb, whatever it is, back so that everybody else can eat.
That's about 10 times their size, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's definitely a lesson in that. We can do more together than we ever could separately.
So, in the work that you're doing, is there space for that in what you all are doing?
Sorry, I think I missed it. Did you ask a question?
Yeah, yeah. In the work that you're doing, is there space for that? Is there a platform for that? Or how do we, as we work toward breaking down racial barriers, how do we work toward breaking down the barriers that exist among women of the same color, women of different nationalities? How do we do that?
Hmm, that's a good question. I think first it starts with truth telling, right? Here's, whatever the issue is that we're trying to work towards. Um, and I know when we're thinking about, for example, in my work, when we're talking about sexual violence or domestic violence or even racial violence, we have to start telling the truth about what that looks like. We have to start breaking down stereotypes of, what people think, these look like, and actually start talking about what they really are. Um, get away from, victim blaming, get away from um, narratives that don't serve the purpose that we want it to serve, like this common goal that we're reaching towards. And I think, after we start telling the truth about what the issues really are, um, we can start to then see what the goal is, right? Not just smoke screens of, for example, when we think about sexual violence, where one of the stereotypes or the smoke screens are that women are asking for this by what they're wearing, by the choices that they make, by X, Y, and Z, and these are all smoke screens, right? They're stereotypes, they're things that aren't true. But when we start talking about the truth of sexual violence stems from power, it stems from control, somebody wanting to take advantage of somebody else to serve their own purposes. And it's not necessarily for pleasure, right, or sexual gratification. We have to start telling the truth that, you didn't ask for this. This was not your fault. And when we can start breaking down those myths that we've been fed, we can start, moving toward a common goal together. I know this isn't your fault. How can we restore what's been taken from you? I know that what you were wearing wasn't to blame for this. How can we, move past what has happened to you and start moving towards justice and whatever that looks like? So it starts with truth telling. It starts with breaking down myths and stereotypes and getting on the same page so that we can start to move forward. I don't know if that made sense. I was kind of jumbled, but I think it really boils down to making sure we're all thinking about this the same way, um, and not being distracted by the lies and the myths that are out there.
So what it looks like to me is that we're always on um, the issue and not the cause of the issue. Because even if somebody is dressed in a certain way, many times people are operating based on images that have been fed to us that people want to see. So you dress like the people that are in the music videos, or you dress like the people that are in the movies. Um, Even, I'm going to tell you, Brittany, I think about the statistics about freshman girls who are raped on college campuses every year. So we have, we know how people think. And then you add alcohol to it and all of these other narratives that have fed girls into down this path. And we don't ever talk about that. We just talk about the rape statistics, and very little is talked about when it comes to holding men, holding boys, young college students accountable for what they do. We just talk about the rape statistics, and that's very troubling to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and again, I missed part of that, but I think, when we start talking about the statistics, when we start talking about, what these crimes really look like, I think one of the things that is important is to look at how we, want to hold people accountable, but how are we addressing the guilt and the shame that we place on victims for how we are talking about sexual violence on college campus or anywhere. Um, because the way that we talk about it in society leads people to feel a lot of times like it is their fault, like they could have and should have done something different.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's really, something that hurts us as a society, not just the people that are have experienced a sexual assault or sexual violence of any kind.
But back to what I was saying, we still don't, I don't know any organizations that are geared toward helping fraternities understand how they are to conduct themselves as men, as
Yeah,
responsible young men. On no college campus in the United States of America, I have not heard, if there is an organization that's doing that, I haven't heard that. So, as much as we have all of these services to help people after the fact, and still that's difficult for people to seek help, there's still nothing in place holding men accountable or saying to these young men, saying to them how they should conduct themselves because, Hugh Hefner is a celebrity.
yeah, and I can't speak to, the colleges here specifically of, what they're doing on campus. There have been instances where they, thankfully let us as the Rape Crisis Center come in and talk to the different fraternities and sororities and start discussing what consent looks like, what sexual battery is when we're talking about statute and legal terminology. Here's what sexual assault is, here's what harassment looks like. um, but it's more than that. It's a conversation about consent. It's about boundaries. It's about open communication. And I think there's a lot of work to be done there, to your point, that can focus on, and we know anybody could be a perpetrator of sexual violence and anybody could be a victim. But it is overwhelmingly men who are the perpetrators and women who are the victims. And so I do think um, that there is work to be done there to continue to talk about what consent looks like, and open communication so that there are boundaries that are established. And it's not, one of the things that we hear a lot is like, oh, it isn't sexy when you have to ask for something. People want, I'm the man, I'm supposed to take charge. But again, really kind of breaking down those myths and of saying you want to understand what it is that your partner is looking for, what they want, so that this is an experience that both of you can leave away from, you know, having taken pleasure in it and not somebody being taken advantage of. So there is work to be done there for sure, especially on college campuses in the community, to really bring awareness to what that looks like.
We're having these conversations because of the possibility of Roe v. Wade being overturned and the question that keeps coming to my mind as much as we're working so hard or the alleged work to protect the fetus and not enough conversations about protecting the owner of the womb where the fetus is developing that you are
Yeah.
so concerned about protecting. How do we as women stand up for those rights? Stand up for, hey, I'm alive. What are you doing to protect me? Because I think that's why we're at this point. Or do you see it the same way?
So you were asking, how do we as women?
Yeah, if there's such an effort to protect the fetus, how do you skip the woman and go straight to the fetus?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the that's the question, right? Who gets to decide what I, as a woman, want to do with my body? And I think that is also a smoke screen. This shouldn't be the discussion of what who gets to choose this for me, but I think if people are that concerned about, children and babies, to let's have a bigger discussion as well about what this can look like as a society. How do we wrap our arms around young parents or young children as they have or grow their families? What supports do we have for people who need childcare, who need medical care, who need access to food, water, clean water, daycare, whatever it is that their basic needs are? How do we wrap ourselves around people in that way, and make it easier for people who want to have children to have them in an environment that's safe, and that's supported?
So, Brittany, what do you have coming up next? What are you working on?
Oh, that's a good question. I just injured myself. So I'm recovering for the next couple months with physical therapy after a surgery that I had. But I was slated to, do a couple of talks about how to look at racial justice in women's work. For in violence against women, and also for the Florida Council Against Sexual Violence. But I'll have to push those back a little bit while I recover from this surgery. And hopefully in the summer and also in the fall, we're looking at how to engage youth around gun violence, how to address trauma in Black communities, communities of color. What does that look like for us to talk about trauma, for us to start processing our trauma, the generational trauma that we carry? So these are some things that we're working on for the fall and the summer, and in the summer and in the fall, and how to engage you in those conversations. But I do also want to say that the Rape Crisis Center is absolutely available for folks that want to have these conversations privately about what is their healthcare look like, how do they get access to certain things. If they've been assaulted or know someone who's been assaulted, there's space there for folks to have a conversation that's safe, that's private, that's confidential, and you can really nail down what your options are there as well, because justice looks different for everyone, and everybody's journey is going to look a little bit different. So there is support locally to figure out what that looks like for you.
Excellent. Brittany Coleman, thank you very much for being on Sisters of Wellness, where our goal is for us to live out that scripture that says older women are to teach the younger women. And we want to make sure that people understand how important they are as a human being, first and foremost, and then to be treated with respect and dignity as a human being. So, Brittany, thank you very much for being here, for being a part of our conversation. And I look forward to having more conversations with you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you all so much for joining us for this edition of Sisters of Wellness. We hope you will join us on Thursday for the Timbuktu Report. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. If you're on Facebook, please follow and like and share. Until next time, I'm Pamela Marshall at the Wellness Radio TV and at the Wellness Radio TV podcast. Remember, there is healing at the well. Make it a fantastic moment.